Hi and welcome to Super-Yacht-Stories. These are some stories that I collected when I worked as a sailor on board various super yachts around the world. The names of those involved have been changed to protect the guilty and the innocent alike. Everything else is as it happens. The names of boats and crew cannot be divulged for obvious reasons. This story is called The Drunken Captain. This was one of my first jobs that I got, so I was relatively inexperienced and quite green. I flew from Nice in the south of France to Valencia in Spain to join a 35-metre sailing boat. This was a pretty big yacht for me, that had two masts with the front mast bigger than the aft one at the back. I was incredibly excited to be joining such a big sailing boat that sounded like it had an amazing itinerary. I took a taxi from the airport to the marina and found the yacht not far from the car park. I took my bag and met the captain and stewardess on board. They showed me around and seemed nice and relatively friendly. The captain was an English guy in his 50s who appeared quite jovial, and the stewardess, who happened to be his wife, was a tiny lady from Germany who had a thick German accent. They showed me my cabin at the front of the boat, where I also met the other deckhand on the yacht, who was a guy from the Caribbean. He seemed friendly enough, however, I did find it a bit difficult to understand him, but maybe that was just because of his broad Caribbean accent. He was a very small guy who looked like a 12-year-old boy. From a distance, you would think he was an adolescent, but in fact, he was a 60-year-old man. The other crew member on the yacht who I met was a girl with very short hair who was the chef and was from Canada, if I remember correctly. So these were the 5 crew who were on board to take the yacht from Valencia to Turkey, where we would meet the owners and guests for their 3-week holiday around Turkey. A couple of days later, we left Valencia and began sailing across the Mediterranean Sea. Although I was an experienced sailor, albeit not on massive yachts, it seemed like the captain and stewardess had many trust issues, so didn't want to give me much time on watch. When you are sailing or motoring from place to place, someone has to be on watch. It's their responsibility to make sure the boat is navigated safely and doesn't have any trouble with objects or other vessels or weather conditions. For sailing vessels, you also have to check the sails are set correctly, or that there isn't too much or too little sail out. For whatever reason, the captain only gave me 2 hours on watch in the day and in the night time as well. The 60-year-old from the Caribbean didn't have any watch time at all. Additionally, when I was on watch, I was not allowed to touch the sails or adjust them in any way. Also, we never discussed anything to do with safety, like fire, grounding, abandoned ship procedure, which, looking back, should have been a major red flag or warning for me of the things that were to come. I was a fairly inexperienced yacht crew and I guess fairly naive. A couple of days into our voyage, the chef took me aside in the galley and asked me a concerned question. Have you noticed how much the captain is drinking? Yes, I did notice that, but it's only a few beers. I'll keep an eye on it, I replied. Exactly what I could do about this, I didn't know. But I didn't want her being unduly worried about it, so I tried to reassure her. The captain would sleep on the sofa in the main salon. This is like the sort of lounge area on the yacht where the owners would relax or watch TV when on board. Sometimes when on watch, I would need to inform the captain of a navigational problem or possible danger, so I would go down the few steps from the pilot house into the main salon to do so. As the days went by, the stink of beer surrounding the captain became stronger and stronger. But he did still appear to be able to perform his duties, and I was new to yachting and also to this boat. So who was I to tell him how to do his job? Furthermore, we were halfway across the Mediterranean Sea, and none of the crew could get off even if they wanted to. Thankfully, the boat made it to go check without incident. We were supposed to moor up alongside in the marina. However, because of an engine problem, which caused some oil discharge, we had to remain at anchor. The marina staff were very strict and didn't want us polluting their marina. 4 or 5 days later, the problem was fixed and the owners and their daughter came on board via tender. The tender is a small type of motorboat that is used to transport the guests to and from the yacht. These can be hard boats but are often a rib, which is a rigid inflatable boat. Inflatable ribs are good because they don't scratch the paintwork of the yacht and are very forgiving. Although I had a license and I'd spent many years in such boats, the captain once again would not allow me to drive the tender, so I just helped get the guests on or off the boat with their luggage. Happily, the trip with the owners was successful and they left the yacht happy and had a good holiday. When they left, however, the other deckhand had a medical emergency and needed to go to hospital ashore for an operation. I go into this in more detail in another story, which is titled A Pain in the Arse. Additionally, during the trip around Turkey, the German stewardess and captain became nastier and nastier to the chef, to the point that the chef decided to leave the boat as soon as possible. She was going to leave immediately, but I talked her into staying until the end of the guest charter, until the guests went home. When I joined this boat, I thought it sounded like a dream come true. They told me that once the owner's trip was finished in Turkey, we would travel back to Spain. Following that, we were to go across to the Caribbean, through the Panama Canal, and up the coast to San Francisco to watch the America's Cup. But unfortunately, this boat was beginning to feel less like a dream come true and more like a nightmare. As soon as the other deckhand was out of hospital and on board, we left Bodrum in Turkey to make our way back to Valencia in Spain. As we ventured westward across the Mediterranean, the drinking started again. However, it wasn't just the captain drinking this time. The stewardess also started. In the afternoons, they used to drink quite a lot together, sitting in the pilot house or cockpit. The pilot house was an inside area where you could stay and navigate the boat. It was the best vantage point to see what was coming and make sure you could take avoiding action where needed. Aft or behind the pilot house, there was a sliding door which went out into the cockpit. The captain would drink beer, but the stewardess preferred to drink gin and tonics. As time went by, I also noticed that she became more and more irritable and miserable and quite aggressive towards me and the other deckhand. One afternoon she came up into the pilot house moaning that she had to cook food for the rest of the crew. Having annoyed the chef so much that she left, I guess somebody needed to do the cooking. She also seemed to have been drinking while in the galley. I'm happy to do some cooking if it would help. I'm no chef, but I'm quite a good cook, I said, offering my services. I wouldn't trust you to cook, came her reply. I'll do the cooking, cleaning, and sail the boat. I wouldn't want to eat any of your food, she replied nastily. She seemed to be getting more and more angry. I wasn't trying to be difficult or anything, I was just offering to help out. Then she left the pilot house and stormed back down the 3 steps into the main salon and ventured forward to the galley. 30 seconds later, she came back up into the pilot house with a big saucepan full of what I can only describe as gruel. It was a grey in colour concoction. I don't know if it was chicken, pork or fish or what it was really. I didn't know, but it was in a stainless steel saucepan with a ladle. To be honest, it didn't really look appetizing. Come with me, she shouted as she passed me and proceeded to storm out of the pilot house and into the cockpit. You don't appreciate me and my food, so I'll just tip it over the side. I followed, but I was really shocked about her behaviour. To be honest, I thought she may do something bad to either to herself or to the boat. She walked out of the cockpit to the starboard side, that's the right side, of the boat and then shouted, "I'll just tip it over the side. Is that what you want me to do? Just tip it over the side?" At this point, the captain came out and tried to calm her down by saying nobody had said anything about her food. As I wasn't on watch, I decided this would be a good time to return to my cabin and lie low for a bit. I told the other deckhand about what had happened, and he informed me I'd just stay out of her way if I were you. I don't think she's a very happy person. I got the impression he had seen this behaviour all before. A few days later, I found out that it was the stewardess's 50th birthday on that day, and let's just say she wasn't very happy about it. She really started to ramp up her drinking in the afternoon, but I could tell by her demeanour that this wasn't happy drinking or jovial drinking. This was drinking to forget. That night I came up on watch at 2 a.m. to take over from the stewardess. I was extremely surprised and shocked by what I found when I walked up into the pilot house. It was dark with red lights on, as you would expect. The radar and chart plotter were doing their job, as were the other navigational instruments. What worried me most was the state of the stewardess, who was absolutely paralytic. Fair enough, you might think, but the problem was that she had been on watch on her own for the past 4 hours. When you're on watch, you are in charge of the safe navigation of the boat and the safety of both the vessel and the crew. There are rules about drinking while in charge of the boat, particularly a boat of this size. They basically prohibit it. At the end of your watch shift, it is customary to fill out the logbook and mark your position on the chart, so if anything happens, there's a record of where you are. However, this was too difficult a task for this inebriated crew member, who mumbled incoherently while slurring her words. "Oh, you can put the position on the charts. You're a yacht master." She then proceeded to stagger down to her cabin, bouncing off the walls of the companionway, the main salon, and the stairs down past the galley to the crew quarters. I checked around me, double checking the radar and chart plotter, and thankfully there was no navigational danger. But I was still incredibly concerned that someone in her state was allowed to conduct a solo watch. We had only just made it through the Straits of Messina, which is the gap between Italy and Sicily, and probably one of the busiest shipping lanes in the Mediterranean. Furthermore, we still had a long way to get across the Mediterranean back to our destination, Valencia. The following day, I began texting people our location regularly so that if anything happened, they knew where to search. Additionally, I located my life jacket and put it on the bunk so I could easily access it in an emergency. To be honest, through all my years sailing, I have never been more frightened than I was after seeing this intoxicated stewardess on this yacht. I did broach the subject with the captain the following day. "Sorry about that, but it was her birthday. I'll keep an eye on it," he replied nonchalantly, and that was all that was said about it. In the days that followed, the captain and stewardess continued their drinking, particularly in the afternoon, but they didn't appear to be so inebriated as before. Needless to say, as soon as we reached Valencia, I informed the captain that I would be leaving the boat as soon as possible. He did ask me why I wanted to leave, and I made an excuse about needing to get home, but by the look on his face, I'm pretty sure he knew the real reason. So this didn't turn out to be the yacht for me. The dream job with the dream itinerary of a lifetime. Instead, it was an absolute nightmare, and I'm happy to have survived, but I don't want to ever repeat. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and more stories will be coming your way real soon.